This is me in inZOI, or hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. I didn't really know much about this game, but it's currently rocketing up the trending games on Steam, released last night. I'm interested to see how high this peaks. It seems to be like a Sims competitor type game, but I've seen a lot of comments on my channel asking me to check this out because the system requirements look brutal. However, there's two different system requirements lists here, and so I really need to point this out because I see some people talking about these smart ZOI hardware requirements. Is it ZOI or Zoe? I'm gonna get brutalized in the comment section by people if I'm mispronouncing this. Oh well, deal with it. Anyway, the smart ZOI requirements, this is talking about like an experimental AI feature that governs the character's behavior, which is not the same as the system requirements needed to actually play the game. So where I've started out is with the minimum PC specs. I've thrown together an RTX 2060 6GB based system to try and check this out. Now, I do have 32GB of RAM in my system, not 12, so I am above that, and my lowest end processor I could find that was similar to this is a Ryzen 5 5600X, not a 3600. So I'm actually a little bit above the min spec, but not crazy out of line with that. I do have the game installed on an SSD as well. So let's go ahead and get into the game. All I've done so far is the character creator, and it held to, usually 60 FPS, but did dip below at times. I've selected my house. Here we go. Let's go ahead and see if this game actually does manage to hold up reasonably playable on this class of minimum requirement hardware. The other thing we should check out probably is what are the graphic settings that it defaulted to, because that's what I'm going with so far is the default graphic settings. I can kind of shrink myself down out of the way here, and we'll actually try out a variety of hardware in this video, but let's start with this. So the game has defaulted to using native resolution using DLAA. So that's generally more demanding than if you were either upscaling or using a like a native TAA type of anti-aliasing solution in most games. It looks like it's targeting a 60 FPS maximum and using VSync to hold to that if it gets there, although you can see that currently we're down in kind of the 50 FPS range. Looks like it defaulted to motion blur off. A lot of people will be happy with that. Defaulted to ray tracing on using the ray tracing object set to mesh. Now I did check, the developers posted a optimization guide, and they said that you can save a lot of performance going to the fallback mesh, but they said the game may crash or be unstable on high-end hardware, which sounded like a really interesting post. Not quite sure why that would be unstable on high-end hardware specifically, but there you go. Now, it did have a shader cache at the beginning of the game. I'm interested to see if that caught all the stutters. We'll have to find out. And anyway, it defaulted to the low graphics preset. So this is the low graphics preset. Again, seems to be targeting 60 FPS at a native 1080p resolution, because to be clear here, this is at 1080p resolution. Does it even say that anywhere here? Well, anyway, we're on 1080p here. Now, let's go ahead and see how we're performing. So I was expecting, honestly, that we might be down in like the 30 FPS range or so, but it seems to be well above that. Let me start playing the game. And let's get the camera maybe down to top view or something like that. This feels a little too close here. Shoulder view. All right, we can walk around the house. Looks like we are dipping into the mid 40s or so. How do I adjust the camera? Maybe we can zoom in and out. Can I get let's go back to top down view and zoom out. There we go. That seems like a more natural way to play this game. Okay, so zooming out seems to give us a, we're still in the 50 or so FPS range. So really, as far as I can tell, the minimum hardware, whoa, we got a huge stutter there though. That was interesting. Okay, this is an Unreal Engine 5 game, so I was curious what the stuttering situation was going to be like. It certainly appears to be, there are stutters. At least we got one there. Again, it did have a shader compilation step at the beginning. Also, I should mention the game is in early access, so a lot of times with games, I don't even test them out. Ooh, got some big stutters there again. Now, if these are shader compilation stutters, these tend to die down after you've played the game for a little while. Looks like at low graphics settings, we are definitely getting things popping in as we get close. So the game does, you know, there's a reason it's running okay here, I guess is what we'll say. It seems to be pretty close to 60 FPS though. We're into the mid 50s. Seems like if you were somebody on a variable refresh rate display here, going for around 60 FPS, which for this style of game I would imagine seems just fine, you'd be having a reasonable experience here. It looks like we can hit 60 FPS at times. Let's go ahead and do the biggest adjustment I think we could do to try to get more performance. So let's actually unrestrict the maximum FPS so we can go beyond 60. And let's go to quality DLSS. So this is lowering the internal rendering resolution, but then using the DLSS algorithm to try to still make it look like 1080p. And this seems to have got us a ton of performance. We're up into the 90s now. And let's see, let's try to scroll around the town pretty quickly, see what we can do to it. And yeah, it actually looks like we are able to be really in decent performance here. Again, the I didn't like that we had some shader compilation spikes, is at least what it seems like, or traversal spikes. It's hard to tell which is which with Unreal Engine 5 sometimes. Things do seem to be running a bit smoother now, though. And yeah, you can change the camera. Okay, so certain camera angles certainly look to be more difficult here. So if I go down to this level, looks like we are down closer to 60 FPS, although now things seem to be going back up into the 80-ish range. Huh. So is it just loading in a bunch more stuff as we camera panned down that kind of tanked the frame rate there? Yeah, so it seems like if you suddenly camera panned to somewhere it couldn't see before, things can drop performance a little bit. But yeah, overall, I would say that somebody on the minimum spec actually has a pretty reasonable shot at playing this game at least at the low settings with a pretty decent frame rate. So that is pretty good. We could try out some other hardware, but why don't we try out some other settings while we're here on the 2060. So the biggest thing I would keep in mind out for with the 6GB graphics cards is going to be the, you wouldn't want to turn up VRAM heavy features. Usually that's textures and things like that. If we keep DLSS on the quality mode though, I wonder if we could go up more to the medium graphics settings and still get a reasonable experience, especially if we leave DLSS at quality. So here, by leaving DLSS at quality and going to the medium settings, I would say our performance is overall better than it was at the native 1080p at the start, but it is, there's still a decent amount of pop in here and things. Ooh, we're getting some stutter spikes. Yeah, as things load in, we are definitely getting some spikes. So I would say so far my biggest concern is just stutters as we move around. Yeah, very stuttery right there as well as we pan the camera. It probably isn't VRAM related because our per process usage is only reporting a little over 4 gigabytes at the moment. But sometimes when you're spilling over VRAM, okay, when we turn back around there, I kind of got the spike again. So that's leading me to believe it's more of a loading things in as you transition areas rather than a shader compilation spike. Yeah, notice as things are loading in here, we're getting big spikes. Now sometimes, depending on how they've set things up, that can be helped by having more VRAM, and it's shuffling things in and out of VRAM that causes spikes, but it can also be just, even if you had VRAM, it's just loading things in at that point and you get these stutters. Okay, so that's my biggest thing so far. It seems stuttery, and we'll have to try out some hardware with more VRAM and things like that to try to pin down if that helps or not. Being said, overall performance-wise in this style of a game, I think our overall performance seems pretty okay. I'm going to go up to high settings, again with DLSS Quality enabled, and let's go ahead and see how this goes. Okay, performance has absolutely taken a nosedive, so badly that now I'm curious if part of the issue is running out of VRAM. So, okay, well actually, no, as things loaded in, so part of that was just loading things in. So now that things are loaded in, things got a bit better. Oh, but now we've tanked really low again. Yeah, this, I'm guessing now, has more to do with, I mean, there's a performance issue as well as likely hitting some VRAM limits and things like that. I don't want to explore this in too much detail and waste too much time here. It seems like sticking to the low or medium settings is probably the way to go, and using DLSS at the quality setting gains a lot of performance back compared to running at native DLAA, even if things look a bit softer. So yeah, seems like a pretty reasonable way to go here, and the minimum specs do seem pretty realistic. Biggest issue so far is the stutters, because they are definitely there. Let's try out some other hardware. All right, I put in the RX 6700 XT. This is an AMD graphics card, so we won't have DLSS, but we should have FSR. And I also bumped up to 1440p resolution, and this is a 12 gigabyte VRAM card, so we can take a look at that. Now, in the graphics menu, I noticed that it defaulted to running at 66% resolution scale. So even though I'm on a 1440p output, it's not really rendering the game at 1440p, although we were around 80 FPS. Let's go ahead and kick that up to a full 100% resolution. So this is now at our full monitor resolution. And okay, I can instantly tell things look better. Things like these power lines and stuff like that were flickering a bit at the lower rendering resolution. And if we look at it here, we are still right about 60 FPS. Although we are at low settings, albeit with some ray tracing here. So again, it does still have the ray tracing turned on with the mesh object rather than the fallback mesh, but we are at the low settings otherwise. So it looks like 1440p, 60 FPS, low settings with ray tracing on the 6700 XT. Let's maybe run around a little bit just to confirm that we're good there. What's our camera view options again? Maybe we go top down and kind of fly around the city kind of quickly here, see how things go again. Not getting as many stutters as we were on the 2060, so at least some of the stuttering might be VRAM related. Let's focus back in on the character. Now, I ran around a little bit off screen just to make sure everything was running, I mean off camera, and I did get a couple of stutters, so let's maybe, oh yeah, there's a stutter right there, down to 5 FPS. So not all stuttering is eliminated here just by being on the higher VRAM card. Also, that wasn't the only thing that was causing stuttering, although it does seem to stutter less than it did on the 2060. Anyway, let's play around with the graphics settings a little bit. So again, this is a native 1440p right now. And again, we could pull down the resolution scale, or we could use the FSR to do the same thing, but using the FSR upscaling algorithm. If we go with the FSR and we go to quality, this will be basically back down to the 66% rendering resolution scale, but just using the FSR algorithm rather than whatever TAA or TSR solution the game has by default. So this seems to be getting us to around a little over 80 FPS, but you can see now that the flickering over here, the flickering unstableness in the power lines, things like that, do take a bit of a hit, and in motion I think things tend to break up a little bit more. Again, you can look at the around the character edges and things like that. When we turn, you get some breakup. But again, a lot of performance boost for doing that. So changing the rendering resolution is a very solid way of boosting performance. Again, here's back to the native 1440p where the power lines, things like that, still a bit of ghosting around the character, to be honest. So it's not even really perfect using their native pathway. So interesting stuff. Now I am also, again, curious, what if we went to the medium graphics settings? So let's go up to medium. Again, we're back to the native 1440p. Looks like medium is, well, let's give it a minute to load in, but it looks like we didn't drop that much by going to medium settings. So it looks like the 6700 XT is fine at medium settings. I will say that it's showing an allocation of a little over, oh, there's a stutter again, a little over 6 gigabytes of VRAM, so it's possible that the 6 gigabyte cards could have a bit of an issue at medium settings, and low could be a better choice for those. Let's go ahead and kick things up beyond that. Let's maybe go to high settings. And let's see if these are still quite so brutal on this card, or if that was more like the 6 gigabyte card just running out of VRAM. So high settings here, again, this is a more powerful card, but we're also at 1440p instead of 1080p. seems a lot more playable. We're in the 40 FPS range, and the VRAM allocation is closer to 7 gigabytes. So I think part of the issue we were having with the high settings on the RTX 2060 was we were definitely at that point going over the 6 gigabyte VRAM buffer, and it was crushing performance. So if you have, it looks like here 8 gigabytes would probably be fine. We're good. We're definitely getting stutters going back through this area again, and I don't think that's shader compilation unless it's characters loading in that we haven't seen before. We've been through this area before, but if it is loading in new assets that we hadn't seen, it could, again, potentially be shader compilation. Shader compilation tends to get smoother the more you play the game once you've seen all the shaders, whereas if it's just loading in new assets causes stuttering, that would be, I guess, a harder fix. We could try high settings with FSR 3 at quality, because again, even the native isn't looking perfect around the character or anything like that with the native TAA. So it's looking like with FSR quality, we're up to around 50 FPS or so. I would say in this style of game, that could be perfectly acceptable. This isn't like a kind of game where you're gonna need a super high frame rate or anything like that, I think, to enjoy it. So there is that, and how bad would it be if we went all the way up to ultra settings? Because again, this is the kind of game that you might be able to tolerate at a lower frame rate in order to enjoy the visuals more. So let's go up to ultra settings. I'm hoping there's less pop-in of objects and characters at these higher graphic settings. Again, remember we're on FSR quality, so we're not at a true native 1440p. I like that the draw distances seem a lot better here. That's definitely good. We're still getting some stutters at times. We could go to the top-down view for a second here, kind of scroll quickly. Yeah, do you guys see that there's still some things popping in as we move closer, but it seems to be a lot less than it was at the lower graphic settings. But yeah, still as I pan over here, a lot of stuff kind of pops in quickly. So if you move through things quickly, it looks like we'll still get some amounts of pop-in and things. But yeah, it looks like this card can overall handle pretty high settings if you're not chasing necessarily 60 FPS in the game. Looks like my character has decided to go back home. Or to somebody's home. Is that my home? I don't know. Where even is home? Okay. Well, let's go ahead and look at what this game does absolutely. Wow, that car looked really bad driving by. Lots of ghosting. Anyway, I want to see what this game looks like on, let's just max things out on a 5090. Okay, I've now put in an RTX 5090 and I've moved over to a high-end CPU-based system as well with the 9800X3D. In short, this is basically the highest end PC you can buy right now, and at current awful GPU pricing, that means like a $4,000 something system. You can pay that just for the 5090 at current pricing. The point is, we're gonna look at this thing absolutely maxed out. I'm curious if it's still gonna stutter. I'm also noticing that at native 4K, and I've moved to 4K resolution, we are still getting a lot of instability on certain things, which I don't really like, although I'm curious if moving to DLAA would solve that issue. So we're at 100% 4K resolution here. But again, it's using whatever TAA-based system the game defaults to. Let's try kicking on DLAA, which would still be a native 4K, but it's gonna be using the DLAA pathway. Oh yeah, that clears it right up. So one thing I'll say is it looks like if you're on an NVIDIA RTX GPU, DLAA makes a lot of sense. Things look so much more stable now, especially that in the background there. So DLAA has done a lot for the, except wait, did that cost a massive amount of performance? Okay, we're at about 69, nice, and 70 FPS, but when I had that turned off, I feel like our frame rate was over 100, wasn't it? Okay, it was in the mid 80s, so not over 100. So DLAA certainly has a performance cost. So I'll amend my other statement to, if the performance headroom is there, DLAA seems to look significantly better than whatever they have default built into this game. All right, so I think things look very sharp now. We are at the maxed out graphics settings. We're at ultra on everything. The ray tracing is turned on with the mesh setting, all of that, ultra settings here. It's leaving depth of field and motion blur off by default, so I'll leave those off. That's probably more of a personal preference kind of thing. I'm curious if we still get stuttering. That is the question. So let's go ahead and try running around a bit here. What if we go into very fast mode and see if we can run around a bit? So, okay, right there, big stutters. So you can still, yep, stutters there as well. So you can still absolutely trigger stutters, even running on a very, very high-end system. Also, this looks absolutely hilarious running at this speed. Okay, and we're getting the stutters again transitioning up and down the street. So it does seem to be one of those Unreal Engine 5 like traversal stutter kinds of things is the way I would read this, where as it loads in a new area, you can get stutters even on a super high-end system. I'm curious if we weren't running quite as fast, if they'd be, you know, quite so bad. So that's something we could look at. Also, I'm curious, what if we just tried to lock to 60 FPS? But the stutters are going down to 3 FPS if we look at our 1% lows here. So I don't think that would entirely solve the problem. Anyway, the game does look, especially for this, life sim type of game, I mean, the game looks very good maxed out at 4K. Like I said, especially for this type of game. So there is that. I just wish that something could be done with those traversal stutters, although, you know, maybe in normal gameplay you're not running through the city quite so much. I don't know. If I go to DLSS Quality, I imagine we're still going to get a very good looking image and frame rates will boost significantly. Looks like, yeah, that gets us to closer to the 90 FPS range. And yeah, I think things still look quite good there. So I think using DLSS Quality here still makes sense. And in some ways, I think looks better than the native TAA solution it was giving us. So yeah, the 1% lows, and yeah, there's another stutter right there, and I'm still running at normal speed. So it looks like even using DLSS Quality on the highest end system you can get, we can still get stutters. So that's my overall thought so far. This is an early access game, so it'd be nice if they could do something regarding the stutters, improve things a bit somehow. But overall, it looks like this is very scalable. The 2060 at minimum spec was able to play the game at least around 60 FPS, or even above it if you're willing to use upscaling, which again, I think DLSS Quality looked pretty good here, especially compared to their TAA solution. Ran fine on AMD hardware, even using the ray tracing, and looks pretty great maxed out. So a lot of scalability here. It's still in early access. This is day one, so I imagine there's a lot of room to improve. Like I said, my biggest issue currently is the stutters, but if I'm right that this is Unreal Engine 5 based, then we'll see. A lot of games never end up solving that. I hope you guys found the video useful and or interesting, and all of you have an excellent day.